You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take, Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Bingham. Thank you for being here. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor Podcasts, everywhere you get your podcasts, we are there. Jazz apparently had a game last night. I'm not sure if they were informed of it or not. Guys, before we dive into that, hit the subscribe button. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Whatever platform you're on, please hit the subscribe button. You guys are awesome. Okay, the Jazz. The Jazz did have a game last night. It was in Los Angeles. The team apparently was not made aware of the game until the second quarter. And so they didn't show up for the first quarter, and therefore we're in a 17-point deficit. Played really well after that, actually outscored the Clippers by 3 for quarters 2, 3, and 4 combined. But when you don't show up for the first quarter and you're down 17 early, that's a bit of a problem. So Jazz get blown out in the first quarter, and I actually didn't even watch the first quarter. I had a good friend, Ryan Jaime. He occasionally listens to the podcast. He's not as loyal as all of you, but it was his birthday party, and I went to that, and I missed the first quarter, and I checked the score on my phone, and we were down. We were getting blown out, and I thought, oh boy, this is not good, because usually first quarter blowouts mean losses. Like, it's very, very rare for teams to come back from a first quarter blowout. I said that to a friend who's like, oh no, it's still the first quarter. I was like, yeah, and we're down 15 already. We're down 20. And the Jazz never did come back. Never did. And ironically, we got the game we wanted out of Bojan Bogdanovic. I said yesterday, I really wanted him to have a big game and that he was going to be a key, a vital part of our chances of winning. He had 18 points on 6 of 12 shooting, 2 of 5 from 3, 4 of 5 from the line, 5 assists, 2 steals, 3 rebounds, only 1 turnover. Honestly, a great game for Bogdanovic. 18 points again on 6 of 12. So I liked that I saw that. What we didn't expect is that Jordan Clarkson we can't expect this from, but for Jordan Clarkson and Donovan Mitchell to both be shooting very poorly, that's something we can't afford to have, especially when we already have Mike Conley out. We need at least one of those two guys every night to be on, like really on. Those are our two best playmaking scorers. Clarkson's more of just a black hole shooter scorer. But when he gets going, he gets going. We've talked about him a lot. Last night was one of those nights where you're like, oh man, get this guy out of here. He goes 3 of 12. Donovan goes 9 of 26. So our two best scorers combined to go 12 of 38, which is 31.5% from the field. Anytime you've got 38 shots, and what did the Jazz shoot total shots last night? 77. So about half the shots, almost exactly half the shots, were from Clarkson and Mitchell, and they shot 31.5%. That's not good enough. So obviously that to me right there, that's the difference. When you have your two best scorers shooting really, really poorly, and for some reason we can't get Gobert going. Gobert needs to be scoring more than 11 points. He was 4 of 4 from the field. We've got to get him involved more. This now turns into a Quinn Snyder issue. Quinn Snyder has to go back to the drawing board. He's got to change some things up. He's got to figure out how to win on the road, because we are a very average road team on the play. By playoff standards, by teams that make the playoffs, by those standards, because we were above 500 on the road for the regular season, but barely, like 54%. 54%. But for playoff teams, especially a number one seed, we should be able to win a game on the road here or there. And we did. We obviously won both games in Memphis, but that was against the Grizzlies. We got to win. If you want to be a championship team, you got to win on the road once in a while. I think of these great championship teams of the past, Bulls, Spurs, teams like that. They won on the road very easily. They could do it. So the Jazz have got to figure that out. But a couple of things. I should get into gambling. I'm not into gambling, but I should get into sports betting, because what have I said so far about this series? Very, very early, but before game one, before the playoffs even started, I said the Clippers are dangerous. We can beat them, but they are dangerous, okay? That is proving to be very true. Then before this series started, I said that we'll go 7 games and that we can't win without Mike Conley. Then last night, in yesterday's podcast, I said that the Jazz would lose, and I said that we're a very average team by playoff standards when it comes to road play, and that we're very good at home. All of that's proven to be true. All of this. I predicted we'd lose yesterday. We did. I predicted that it would go 7 games. That's looking very likely. I predicted that we can't win without Mike Conley. That's becoming very clear to everybody. So you heard it here first. Simply the Best Sports Podcast, brought to you by Tripio. For those watching, for those that know, Tripio is a travel app I'm looking at launching here shortly. It's actually pretty freaking dope. It's not really brought to you by Tripio, but for those watching on YouTube, I've got it on my water bottle. Just a little subliminal message here for you. You can check out tripioapp.com if you so desire. It's a cool travel app I'll be launching here shortly. But that was all meant as a joke, not an actual plug. But there it is. There's a plug. But all of the stuff I've said is right. All of it's true. The Jazz are very good at home. We're still favored to win the series, barely. But we need Mike Conley to come back. We need him to come back. And, I've heard a lot of people up in arms saying, $30 million hamstring, because it's just a mild hamstring strain. That's how they repeatedly are reporting it. Mild hamstring strain. And, he traveled to LA, gave us all these hopes, and he's just questionable, and then he's out. And so I can't imagine he won't play tomorrow. But in the end, you guys, I know it's a $30 million hamstring. I had those same frustrations where I'm like, dude, play. You're getting paid millions of dollars. Play. Here's the thing with it, with a hamstring, with any injury, but especially a hamstring. If he's not ready, it's not doing us any favors to send him out there. In fact, it's doing us a disservice because what will happen is he'll be ineffective, and then he'll re-aggravate it and be out indefinitely. We'll miss him for even further and just lose the series. So the Jazz are trying their best. I'm sure that Mike Conley wants to play. I'm sure that the Jazz want him to play. This is Mike Conley's best chance at a championship by far that he has ever had, and probably that he ever will have. Maybe next year if he sticks around with the Jazz, but he's just getting older. This is the best chance he's got. This is an all-star season. I can guarantee you he wants to be out there. I can guarantee the team wants him to be out there. There's clearly a reason he's not playing. It's clearly that the trainers, the doctors, the team, whoever feels, you know what? He's just not quite ready. Whatever progress they're expecting him to make or needing him to make, he's not making it to give them the confidence that he could go out there and actually be effective to help us win. Because we don't want an Anthony Davis where he's like, I'm suiting up, I'm going out there, I'm going to help my team win. Completely ineffective for like 3 minutes of play, re-aggravates it, and clearly going to miss the rest of the series. Obviously, the Lakers go on to lose that game anyway, which that was a must-do for Anthony Davis. We're kind of at that point now with Mike Conley. We don't have to win Game 5. We kind of do because then we'd be down 3-2 going back to LA where we've proven to just absolutely suck. But the series isn't over if we lose Game 5. It just puts us in a hole where we're going to be in trouble. So I think you're going to see Mike Conley play tomorrow. I have incorrectly predicted that. I will admit when I'm wrong too. I've just been guessing. I think he'll play. I thought he'd play. Honestly, I thought he'd play, Game 2 of this series. He didn't. I thought he'd play Game 3. He didn't. And then Game 4, I thought for sure he'll play Game 4. He didn't. So I've been wrong 3 games in a row now, thinking Mike Conley was going to come back. It must not be very mild, if he's now out for 2 weeks or something. So a little concerning. It is a little concerning. We need him very, very badly. We cannot win this series without him. Vegas still has us. So here are the updated odds to win the NBA Finals, by the way. This is always interesting for me to watch as the games are played, like who's moving up and down the ladder. The Bucks are now the favorites to win the NBA Finals in Vegas, the Milwaukee Bucks. So that tells you what they're thinking about the Harden and Kyrie injuries. And then the Nets are still second, though, barely behind the Bucks, just barely. Then the Suns, obviously because the Suns have already reached the Western Conference Finals, and they're looking extremely tough to beat right now. The Jazz, though, are fourth, still ahead of the Clippers. And I think that you'll see the Clippers or Jazz, whoever wins this series, I think you're going to see them immediately leapfrog the Suns. They can't be ahead of them right now, though, because the Suns are already one step ahead of everybody else. So it's almost a diss to the Suns to be third when they're the only team that's in the conference finals right now, because Sixers and Hawks are still going. That series is 2-2. It's kind of a ho-hum series because I don't feel like anybody actually thinks either of those teams can win. And I've said that for a while. Another reason I should bet. And Vegas doesn't even have either of those teams in the top 5. So, yeah, Embiid's now banged up. And you might see the Sixers lose this series. Probably not. I'm still taking the Sixers to win it. But without Embiid, they're going to be in real trouble. And he's looking a little banged up. So Bucks, Nets, Suns, Jazz, Clippers. Those are the Vegas odds to win the NBA Finals. So the Jazz still with a decent edge over the Clippers in Vegas anyway. Vegas is probably thinking Mike Conley will come back. Vegas knows that the Jazz are absolutely dominant at home. We have 2 of the next 3 games in Salt Lake, tomorrow night being the first one. So I'm still confident. I'm still confident the Jazz can win in 7. That's what I've said all along. Jazz in 7, Jazz in 7, Jazz in 7. I hoped we could do it in 5. I really hoped we could steal one out in LA. Again, I thought Mike Conley would play. And if he does play in either of those games, maybe they're different because we had runs. I mean, again, last night, the Jazz outscore the Clippers by 3 for the last 3 quarters of the game. So it was really just a bummer that we laid an egg so thoroughly early on because now the Clippers are confident, man. They are confident. They're just beating their chests, dunking all over us. By the way, it's Derek Favors' birthday today, and the poor guy is on every Instagram sporting account that I follow, which is a lot. He's on every talk show. He's on everything. He got dunked on by Kawhi Leonard hard. Like that was a dunk. I've actually not liked any of the posts on Instagram because I don't want to support that. But he got dunked on so hard by Kawhi Leonard. And by the way, that does not happen to Rudy Gobert. If Rudy Gobert is in the lane, Kawhi maybe doesn't even try that dunk. And if he does, he probably gets sent back home with it. That's what Rudy Gobert does, who made first team all defense. We'll get into that. But that was an incredible dunk. Unfortunately, it came just on the eve of Derek Favors' birthday, so happy birthday to Faves. But we just need the Jazz to play better on the road if we're going to win a title. We really do. I think we can win this series because, again, we do have home court. I guess if we just sweep our home court games, we win the championship, right? But that's hard to do because championship teams find a way to win on the road. And so there's a good chance we're going to drop one on the road. We already dropped one to Memphis. We dropped a game to Memphis already on the road. So if we can lose one to Memphis on the road, again, we didn't have Donovan Mitchell, but if we can lose one to Memphis on the road, we can definitely lose one to the Clippers. We can definitely lose one to the Suns or to the Nets or the Bucks. So the Jazz have got to find a way to win on the road. The Clippers are just the most hard-to-follow team. They're down 0-2. They're tied 2-2. They're going to win in 5. They're going to win in 7. They're the worst team ever. They're blowing up the team. I mean, the flip-flopping by me and everybody else with the Clippers has been unreal, and it's because they're just a very bizarre team. They're all over the map. But Kawhi, by the way, I saw an interesting stat. Make sure I quote it right here. When he's been down 0-2 in a series 3 times in his career. Kawhi Leonard is 10-1 in playoff games after trailing 0-2 and has won 2 series that way. So I guess he's won 2 series that way, and this will now be his 3rd that he's in. But he's 10-1. 10-1 in games where he's been down 0-2. He's never lost a series that he was down 0-2 in because he's only lost 1 game, which would have been to the Mavericks just in this last series, right? So the Bucks with the Raptors, and they were down 0-2. They won 4 straight to win that series 4-2. Then the Mavericks, just this last series, they were down 0-2, end up winning that series in 7. And now down 0-2 to the Jazz, and they've won 2 straight. So he's in 11 games that he's played after being down 0-2, he's 10-1. That's pretty remarkable. He played phenomenal last night. He did get a little banged up at the very end there and actually pulled himself out of the game. The game was pretty much decided. The Jazz were making a little bit of a run, and it got kind of interesting down around the 11, 14, point mark where we were kind of within striking distance, but again, they pull away. But he pulled himself out of the game with 4 or 5 minutes to go, if I remember correctly, and never came back. So, and he's got a little bit of a history. Remember, with the Spurs, he missed a whole season with a dead leg, So there's a chance that his load management will be very needed, and you can't do that in the playoffs. It doesn't allow it. The schedule doesn't allow for it. It's every other night we got games. So again, I know you laugh at this. I don't wish injury on anybody, but I wouldn't be too upset if Kawhi had to sit a game or if he was very ineffective for a game because of another dead leg or whatever. But we need Mike Conley back. We need Kawhi to calm down. The Jazz have home court though. We got 2 out of 3 left. Conley's probably getting a little bit healthier. We're hoping. Hopefully he can at least go by game 6 as a very worst case scenario, because if he doesn't, we're cooked. But we'll just wait and see. Okay, making sure I got all the stuff here from the Jazz. Yeah, I think I did. Okay, so all defensive team. Rudy Gobert obviously was named to the all-defensive first team. He's Defensive Player of the Year, so duh. That should be a given. I've actually seen it where the Defensive Player of the Year did not make first team all-defense, and it's kind of like, how can you be the best defender in the league and then not be one of the top 5 defenders in the league? It's a very weird dynamic there. But first team all-defense was Rudy Gobert, Ben Simmons, Draymond Green. I don't get that. Drew Holiday and Giannis. So 2 Bucks players get in there. And then Kawhi made second team, Bam, Joel Embiid, Jimmy Butler, and then I'm actually forgetting the guy's name. It's like Thibault I can't remember his last name, but he's also on the Sixers. So those were the first and second team all defense. So Jazz get 1 guy in, Heat get 2, Sixers get 2, and Bucks get 2. Or no, Sixers got 3 because Ben Simmons was on the first team. Sixers got 3. That's pretty impressive. But Rudy Gobert, of course, makes it. Okay, now getting over to the Nets and the Bucks series. Speaking of these 2 Bucks players that made the first team all defense. Kyrie is out for tonight. Tonight is Game 5. Game 5s are crucial, right? Like they're so important. And tonight is Game 5, Bucks and Nets. The Nets are underdogs at home in a playoff game. This is unreal. If you are the Brooklyn Nets, you have paid so much freaking money trying to buy a championship, and you're now watching that money just sit on the bench with injuries. Kyrie Irving is for sure out. James Harden has been upgraded. I'm doing the quotes for those listening with my fingers. Upgraded to doubtful instead of out, which means I guess we'll see if he tries to go tonight. I think the chances of him playing tonight are extremely unlikely. They're telling us that with doubtful anyway. But this is a huge game for the Brooklyn Nets because this is a team that, I mean, come on, you've got Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. If you can't even make the conference finals with that, yikes. Talk about a waste of money. Talk about a bust. Talk about a letdown. That would be disastrous. That would be absolutely disastrous. And the more that I've been looking into this stuff, following sports, the more I've been doing this podcast, the more that load management and all these things are becoming an issue and you're seeing guys sit out so many games, the more I'm realizing how much I value, and if I was a GM or an owner, how much I would value availability. Are you going to be able to play every night or are you not? Are you going to come to work and earn your paycheck or are you not? Because if you can't play, and if you're injury prone, I apologize. That sucks for you. I just don't want you on my team. I don't. I don't want a guy like Anthony Davis or Joel Embiid or Kyrie Irving. I don't want guys that average sitting out like 30 games a season. They're sitting out like 30, 40% of the year. I don't want that. I don't care how talented you are. I don't care if you're a 25-12 guy, if you're only available for 60 to 70% of the games. Even, I guess 80% would be pretty good, but if you're missing 30, 35% of the games, I don't want you. I don't want you. And the Nets are seeing this right now. They were without Kevin Durant for a huge chunk of the season. They were without Kyrie Irving for a huge chunk of the season. They were without James Harden for a huge chunk of the season. And now they're without 2 of those 3 for the playoffs, when they're in a dogfight 2-2 against the Milwaukee Bucks, who are ready to go for the kill. So tonight's a big game. Kevin Durant's by far the best player on the court in that series, and so we'll see what he can do. But you're going to need guys, and now they didn't have LaMarcus Aldridge, this is a time where, man, he could come in handy, real nicely if he could have stayed healthy himself. Again, he goes out with, kind of a scarier thing with like his heart, right? But you're going to need guys, like Blake Griffin to step up. Joe Harris is going to need to go off. And they're missing guys like Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie's out with injury for the entire season. I mean, and then Karis LeVert, they of course traded away. But it's just, man, if I'm the Nets, I'm so disappointed. I'm like, we have Dinwiddie on payroll, out with injury. We have Kyrie Irving on payroll, out with injury. We have James Harden on payroll, out with injury. I don't know what the LaMarcus Aldridge deal is. It was so quick, maybe they just let him go. Maybe there was some sort of buyout. I don't really know what happened there. But they have, and I don't know what's up with DeAndre Jordan. He's not been playing, looks hurt. Like, how many guys are they paying to be hurt? That would just suck. I mean, I get that like injuries happen, but man, if I'm an owner and I've got guys that are just out with injury nonstop, I would quickly, you think about Moneyball in baseball. You see that movie with Brad Pitt where he just goes for like guys that can get on base. I don't care if they're hitting home runs. I don't care if they're hitting doubles. I don't even care what their RBIs are. I care if they get on base. He doesn't even care necessarily about batting average. Do you get on base? If you draw a lot of walks, you're on base, right? And it's just a completely different approach to the game that worked. Worked for the Oakland A's. And I think I would take a similar approach in basketball with, okay, I'm going to look at, you need superstars in basketball to win. Don't get me wrong. You absolutely need superstars to win championships. You can't do it without them. But you need superstars that can play and that are available, that will be on the court. Because look at this season. The Lakers would have been one of the favorites, and they couldn't even get out of the first round because their second best player couldn't play. So they're gone because of injury. You look at the Nets now, clearly the favorites all season long to win the title, and they're in huge trouble right now. Vegas is now favoring the team they're playing against to win the NBA Finals more than them because of injury to two of their key players. There's just so many guys. The Warriors, when they lose Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant, you just want guys like LeBron, just Iron Man, Karl Malone and John Stockton. We've talked about that. That was kind of how it was though. Jordan played every game season after season, or if he'd miss one or two tops, But nowadays, that's just not how guys do it. I would look for guys where it's like, are you going to be healthy always? And this load management, I actually think almost does them some disservices sometimes where their bodies just aren't quite conditioned, ready to have the playoff run that they need. The NBA needs to do away with back-to-backs and just try and get stars and everybody to stay on the court for all 82 games. Just don't do back-to-backs so the guys will want to play. Okay, so we'll see what happens there. I still think I'm still going to say the Nets win this series. I think you're going to see Harden come back. Probably not for tonight, but if he comes back for Game 6 even, they'll win 6 and 7 if he's effective. And they'll move on. So we'll see what happens there. Isaiah Thomas, not Isaiah Thomas of the Pistons, but the younger Isaiah Thomas, who's had his glory days with the Celtics and now is kind of bouncing around the league. He was on record yesterday saying that he believes Steph Curry is the greatest point guard of all time. And I'm like, thank you. What have I been saying? His list is actually pretty similar to mine. So my list, as you recall, we've talked about this with all the Chris Paul stuff coming up. That's why it is what it is. But he had Steph Curry and Magic Johnson. He didn't necessarily put these in any particular order, but he did. He said he had Steph Curry as number 1. Then he said he'd have to go with Chris Paul at 4, Kyrie at 5. And then he's like, and Magic and Isaiah are 2, 3. And then he's like, but I don't really have a list. And it's like, well, you actually just gave us a list. You just went 1 through 5. So he went Steph Curry, Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas, not him, the other Isaiah. And then Chris Paul and then Kyrie Irving is his top 5. So he's kind of incentivized to put guys like Kyrie and Steph and Chris Paul in his top 5 because it kind of makes him look better because he's in that same era. And we all know that he's not a top 5 point guard, but we also know that he had his glory days where he was right there with those guys. Isaiah Thomas had a season or two where it was like, dang, he's right there with the Steph Currys and the Chris Pauls and the Kyrie Irvings. And obviously he's not anymore, but he had his days. So he's motivated, he's incentivized to make sure that he thinks these current generation guys are top 5 because it just makes him look better. If you ask the other Isaiah Thomas who the best point guard of all time was, I'm sure you'd hear him say Magic Johnson because that was his era. And we all know that he's not better than Magic Johnson, even though he might think he is. We know he's not. Now, when you get a guy who is clearly right there with him, like where it's like Kevin Durant and LeBron James, you're not going to hear either one of those guys say that the other one is the greatest of all time. LeBron will say it's him. Durant will say it's Jordan, because in Durant's mind, he's like, I'm better than LeBron. I don't think he is. I think he is now, but I don't think he has been throughout his career. So he's incentivized. But the thing I want to talk about here, and I'm going to wrap up with this, is there's a glaring omission by Isaiah Thomas on Isaiah Thomas's list, and I'm seeing this as like a trend. Everybody's forgetting about John Stockton. What's going on? He's the all-time leader in both assists and steals. The all-time leader in the history of the NBA. Nobody has gotten more assists or more steals than John Stockton. Nobody. That's 2 major statistical categories. 1 on offense, which is the most important statistic for a point guard, assists, and 1 on defense, steals. He is the all-time leader in both. The dude missed like 20-something games for his entire career. He had 17 of 19 seasons. He played all 82 games. He's a 10-time All-Star. He went to the NBA Finals twice and took Jordan as far as Jordan was ever taken in a finals, which was 6 games, and he did it twice. How are people leaving him off their top 5 list? How? I don't understand. And honestly, I got to say it. It feels, I'm not going to say racist, but it feels like his appearance, John Stockton's appearance, is affecting him from being viewed as a top 5 point guard. Why is he not named? Because he's not flashy enough? Because he's not as athletic? He dominated. It's like when Jeremy Lin was told and being described as deceptively quick. And he called the reporters out. He's like, what do you mean deceptively quick? Like, what does that mean? How can one be deceptively quick? How am I not just quick? Is it deceptive because I'm Asian and you didn't expect me to be quick? Is that what you mean? And Jeremy Lin just called it out. He just called it out. So I got to feel like because Stockton just doesn't look like, he just looks like a regular dad driving a minivan. He does. He's 6'1". He's got kind of the choir boy haircut. He's white in a sport that isn't dominated by white people at all. He can't jump very high. He just doesn't have the look of like this dominant basketball player. He doesn't, and I'll admit that. I agree. He doesn't look like he'd be dominate. I mean, look at Jokic, the guy that just won the MVP. He's like he's really tall, but I mean, he doesn't look like a guy that would be the MVP of the NBA. But for whatever reason, everyone's leaving Stockton off their list. He can't even make top 5. Really? You're putting Kyrie Irving over John Stockton? Come on. For all-time point guard? I mean, I don't get it. John Stockton is easily a top 5 point guard. I've got him at number 3. He's right there neck and neck with Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas does have the 2 titles. But to me, John Stockton, like he just did too much to not be named a top 5 point guard on anybody's list. Everybody should have him on their list. So, all right, that's all I got for today. Bucks and Nets tonight. I'm taking the Nets to win the series. I'm not even going to predict tonight because I don't know, but I'm still going to take the Nets to win the series because I think you'll see Harden come back probably for Game 6. And I'm still taking the Jazz in 7. That's all the time I have for today. I am out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out STBSportsTake.com. Simply the best in sports. 'Cause we are